And that's the thing about real estate, is that you can't look today, because anything that you're looking at today, the reality is it's only going to be done in like 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So like you have to be really, really long-term thinking, and very, very patient.
Have you been thinking about buying your first rental property for some time, or do you already own a bunch of properties? Well, fellow investors, you found the right location to listen and learn from others' successes. Welcome to The Very Real Estate Effect with your host, Axel Monsaint.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec. And talking about Quebec, it couldn't be more true today. It's an honor and a pleasure to have Mr. Jordan Owen, partner at Mondev, here for a fun conversation. How, Jordan?
Thank you for having me.
So it's actually your second time on the podcast.
Yeah.
You were on 3 years ago for a startup that you had developed, and now you've joined the family business at Mondev.
Yes.
And I'm so happy to have you on because, as you know, a lot of you know, I'm keen on development. I think we really need to keep adding more dwellings to the market. We need to build, we need to redevelop.
Mm-hmm.
And couple months ago, it was announced that Mondev is going to be partnering up to redevelop L'ilot voyageur.
Yes.
So for those who aren't sure, L'ilot voyageur is at BERRI UQAM, the old bus station, basically. That's it.
Yeah.
Across the street from the La Bibliothèque Nationale.
Exactly.
So finally, something's going to happen there. I guess it was years in the making.
Yeah. Yeah. The city has tried to sell this for 10, 15, 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
They, about a year ago, submitted a public tender, an RFP, asking all real estate developers to submit their offers. They had pretty constraining requirements.
Okay.
So they wanted a large percentage to be built social housing.
Okay.
So 40% built social housing. That's very hard for a private developer to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard for a public non-for-profit to do, to build the 40% and the 60%. So it was kind of like a losing formula from the beginning. And the city saw that right away.
Yeah.
Because no one submitted offers. They saw zero interest right at the beginning. So
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know they got no offers for
Zero.
that RFP?
Zero. So
wow.
Then what happened is they submitted a second offer saying, okay, now you could submit with a partnership. So you could partner with someone and submit an offer. Again, no one really was creative and thought through this process. We were very fortunate to have the idea of finding a solution to build both. So how could we build market and social housing in a way that is financially feasible and, you know, at the price that the city wanted? So we actually sold a piece of land to UTIL about a year prior to the RFP coming public.
Okay.
So we had a working relationship with them.
Okay, you sold another piece of land, not a piece of land from
not the
voyageur.
no,
okay,
like 2560 St. Patrick was the first kind of deal that we had with them. And then Eric, who's at UTIL, and I are the same age. We connected, and we're both young. We're both kind of, you know, we're creative. So we met and we thought of ways of submitting an offer, which we ended up building an offer that was better than the city predicted. They wanted 40% social. We gave 50% social.
Wow.
So out of the 1,000 units that we submitted, 500 are going to be social and affordable. So 100 are going to be 100% social. Then the other 400 are going to be affordable housing for the students of UQAM.
Okay.
And then on top of that, there's going to be a 500 unit tower by Mondev on Maisonneuve and Barrie. So we're going to be facing the park. So the offer was pretty spectacular in terms of like there still were constraints that we submitted. And I won't go into all the details.
You mean constraint imposed by the city about the project?
That we imposed because we submitted a non-conforming offer. Okay. And there was 2 offers. No one submitted a conforming offer. So
so at least it's a testament to the I was gonna say the madness of their requirements.
And the things that we like differed from what they wanted were very reasonable. Okay. Then the story after that was that the city gets 2 offers, ours and another. The RFP gets canceled. So they cancel the RFP and they say, we don't want to do this anymore. So we quote unquote lost, and everyone lost.
Yeah.
They then reopen again the RFP.
Third
A
time.
third time, and then invite like parties to resubmit us and
whoever else wants to. Yeah.
We adjusted some things,
Mhm.
but nothing really major to what we like. It's the same kind of constraints that we had originally because it's non-negotiable, and we could talk about these constraints on another like example afterwards. These are just, we're not willing to take this kind of risk anymore, especially on this kind of scale.
I actually just enlighten us. What do you mean? Like even just a rough example?
Yeah. Okay. So we have taken in the past zoning risk, which means that you buy a piece of land, you buy a building that isn't zoned for what you want to do, and you buy it today anyway, taking on that risk, hoping that you're going to get the zoning changed. We've been burnt many times in the past 5 years with that problem, and we're still fighting for, like, let's say 1,500 units that we purchased in the past 1,500 potential units that we are still working to get the permit, that there's either a moratorium, which means there's a ban on zoning change, or there's still like we're working with the neighbors. So NIMBY, not in my backyard, we're getting blocked. So there's all these issues that we've been burned so many times. We're no longer willing to take that kind of development risk anymore. And it's not unreasonable. So
no, and wait, hold on. And we can restart right here, okay? I just want to take a pause and just remind everybody, yesterday in the news, Radio-Canada, les mises en chantier in Montreal dropped to a quarter of where they were in 2021. Everywhere you hear la crise du logement, et on devrait vraiment dire, we should really say, la crise du logement abordable, okay? Because there's plenty of units to rent right now at $2,500. So here you are, and thank you so much for coming today. You're one of, if not the biggest developer in Montreal. You are having to explain to the city and kind of fight to get the zoning to build right now about 1,500 units in the pipeline. All you want to do is build another 1,500 units. And basically you're being blocked by the city, the red tape, the regulation.
So we've actually seen, just to be a bit more positive in this, we've seen a major change in the city's willingness.
Recently.
So now the city has opened up the floodgates, say apply for everything.
Okay, good.
Which we are doing. But it hasn't been like that for the past 5 years.
No.
So that's a positive note. But
and I didn't mean to sound negative. It's just I want to kind of state the fact is I have a project that's in a situation like that too. And God knows it's difficult just to be able to get a permit and build. So I can imagine at your scale where, you know, for the scale of your company, you are part of the solution and you're a partner for the city.
And one thing that I'd like to add about this, the L'ilot voyageur partnership, the innovation behind it is more than what you think, just surface level. So we've sold land to the city for social housing purposes. For example, we have a project on 2350 St. Patrick. We just finished it. That required a social quote unquote donation because you have to buy a piece of land, you have to decontaminate it, you have to backfill it, which means you basically have to buy something, make it ready for development, and then sell it to the city at a major loss. So that's
just so everybody's clear.
that's what it is, unfortunately. And we've done that now twice. It's not that much, but on a larger scale, there's now the city owns like probably 50 lots or more. They own tons and tons of lots that are ready for social housing development. And it's not being done because the funding isn't there, the expertise isn't there. So now with L'ilot voyageur, we're giving a solution that not only are we going to be quote unquote donating a parcel of land for 50% of our project for social housing, we're actually going to execute and realize these units. So the fact that we kind of had pushback at the beginning, it shows that it's something that hasn't been seen before because they didn't understand and
they just don't know how to go about it.
So now we're really excited. So
it's amazing news. Congratulations.
And things are moving. I can't necessarily get into the details of exactly what's happening because I'm not allowed. But all I could say is that we are in negotiation with the city to move forward.
I'd love to hear a little bit about the vision of the project, because now we kind of talked about, the history and how it got there, and, did a little bit of a loop with the city regulation. So 1,000 units, first of all, it's amazing prime location across from in diagonal from UQAM, across the street from La Bibliothèque Nationale. As you said, there's this big park.
Yep.
A little bit further up the street, there's the new bus station. Yeah. It's connected to the metro. I mean, it is prime. So what's coming over there? And
there's major changes. Like the STM is investing heavily. They're changing their whole.
You mean in the metro station?
Yeah, they're gonna. That's like their hub, and they're gonna be investing heavily in the next 5 years.
Good.
Which is amazing. The vision architecturally is that we wanted to kind of mirror the Bibliothèque Nationale.
Okay.
And please remember, I'm not the architect.
Yeah.
So
it's okay.
We hire great architects.
Yeah, of course.
Our job is to have the overall vision.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're mirroring the library in terms of its shape.
Yeah.
Our scale is higher, but we have a big tower on Maisonneuve, which is going to be less tall than the Place du Prix.
Okay, to respect the scale.
Exactly. Yeah. So we are above the zoning allowance, but we're still within, reasonable downtown standards.
Yeah.
The materiality is going to be gorgeous. The architecture, there's going to be, breaks in the facade, so it doesn't look like one big piece.
Yeah.
So it's very well designed by Neuf. We're very happy with their work.
Neuf Architects? Yeah.
And other than the individual vision of just the parcel, we also have an overall vision of the area because we're heavily invested in that area.
Yeah, you own also other properties, either already stabilized or in redevelopment.
Just in like a 3-block radius, we have 2 stabilized apartment buildings, and we're building about 700 units just across the street. Okay. So this, like, there's the
on the park,
right? So there's the park, Place Gamelin.
Yeah.
There's L'ilot voyageur, and then right in front there's 3 major parcels that we've owned for almost 10 years now. That we just started the first phase of about 250 units. So we're heavily invested. We know the city is growing eastward.
Yeah.
And it's a city, it's an area that's going to be revitalized.
And I love how you said, for the STM, this is their hub. And I'm thinking back 20 years ago when I got into the city as a young adult, teenager. BERRI UQAM was kind of the epicenter. Yeah. And then, it kind of also had its challenges with the population and all this, but it's still a lot of students around UQAM. It's fairly transient.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, and then it's walking distance to Old Port. It's walking distance to downtown. You can go to the village. You can go
right on the metro.
You're right on the metro. You can go to the South Shore in about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
It's absolutely prime location. Yeah. And I'm glad that, your group has a vision to redevelop this because, 10 years from now, it's going to be an entirely different neighborhood.
And that's the thing about real estate is that you can't look today because anything that you're looking at today, the reality is it's only going to be done in like 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So like you have to be really, really long-term thinking and very, very patient.
I find it's interesting what you said earlier about taking some of the risks, and then we'll go back to L'ilot voyageur, but taking some of the risk when it comes to zoning. I've been on a file like that, and next week I'll do an episode about this. The inherent risk of what is it going to be in 5 years? But in order to do this, you need to buy with today's information, and it doesn't correspond to the use that you'd like to make of it, and you have to go with highest and best use. And so, other people of the community, the city doesn't always realize the risk that we take as developers. And yet it sounds so obvious to people. Of course you did a residential tower right next to this commercial activity or hub. It's like, yeah, but that's not what it was zoned for. How you said you've been burnt, and we're not here to talk about like maybe some of the obstacles that you've had, but how do you, as a group, how do you choose to address this inherent risk and development?
So 2 things. We've never overpaid for land or for buildings on a per foot basis. So we never went above what the market was willing to pay to just take anything.
Yeah.
What has happened in the past 5 years, you're well aware, is that people were willing to overbid. There are major groups in Montreal that paid $150 a buildable foot. So let's say your building was 2,000 square feet and it was like a 1-story building, and you're allowed to potentially build 10 floors. 10 times 2 is 20,000. People would pay $150 per foot for the 20,000 square foot potential building, which is above market and it's not zoned. And people were closing like cash to buy this. And then the result is that you have this asset that you way overpaid.
Yeah.
And you're trying to zone it. And once you do, it's still overpaid on a per foot basis. Yeah. We never had that issue, but we did buy buildings downtown in the Sud-Ouest, in Ville-Marie, where you purchase it at a relatively low price per foot, but then you're kind of working towards getting the permit, and it takes a lot longer than you think. Could be years. Yeah.
It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
And the way to address that is, one, to either do that less and only do that in like extreme circumstances when there's an opportunity that you really can't say no. Either the location is the best that you'll ever have, or your portfolio can take that burden. So there are things that you kind of learn. Thankfully, we didn't get in major trouble.
No.
We weathered the storm. Interest rates, as you know, tripled, quadrupled from basically 0% to 8-9. So our mortgage payments also tripled or quadrupled. But we weathered the storm. We had no real collateral damage. We are still standing, and I think we're stronger today than we've ever been.
Going back to L'ilot Voyageur, you're going to make that neighborhood stronger than it's ever been. It's going to be redeveloped, and I want to continue on the vision that you have, because now knowing that you also have some of the southern buildings, I mean, literally that whole park within like not even a kilometer radius, 500-meter radius is going to be completely changed. What I want to lift my hat to is that everybody knows in the city, knows that area. And yet, as you mentioned, like you and some of the members at Utile, you guys had a vision, you got together, you had to propose maybe 3 or 4 different bids to the city. It took 5 years, but eventually you'll do it. And people who drive by on Saint Laurent or on Saint Catherine or Maisonneuve and stuff, for me, they never think about these things of like, it was like 4 guys who got together for dinner and said, why don't we redevelop this thing? We can add 1,000 units here. And people just see developers as like, oh, these big capitalists who take advantage and stuff. It's like, no, you just don't realize the amount of hurdles you have to go over in order to get to the point where there's even an announcement made that something's going to be done, let alone start construction, let alone stabilize it, let alone get your money back.
And there's a lot of risk that you take as a developer. There's like just the fact that you're doing something today to start in 5 years. No one knows what the future is going to hold. Interest rates could be 15%, tariffs could be 50%. And we'll, like construction, like these are real realities. And we're actually seeing that today, especially with tariffs. This is like a major problem in terms of construction costs.
Yeah. You mean you're doubting your steel structure now?
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. But like these are risks that you could lose your shirt, and it's not you have to take calculated risks and you have to manage them throughout the process, and it's definitely not easy, but it's a process.
When you joined the team, can you kind of share with us a little bit like how does it work? Because I'm sure you guys are bombarded with projects and opportunities, and everybody every day must be telling you, I have the best deal for you since sliced bread.
Yeah.
Now you can only buy so much every year.
Yeah.
I hope, and I'm sure you guys have a very good screening process. What are some of the key factors and criteria that you look at to even consider a location?
So there's a few things. Let's say there's 2 different markets that we play in terms of residential development. There's apartment for rent, and there's condos / townhomes for sale. Those are 2 different things. So I'll talk about, let's say, just apartments for now. Apartments can only work in an area where rent is high enough. Unfortunately, that's just the fact. The vast majority of our projects are rental, and like let's say 90% of our construction is rental. So that's what we could focus on. If your rent isn't above a certain threshold per foot, or let's say like if it's not above $1,600 for a one bed, let's say, you just financially can't make it work.
Yeah.
It's just, and like you're just losing money in reality. You can't go into something expecting to lose money. So you have to find opportunities that are very central. It's very difficult. It's very slow and hard to find opportunities because you're really looking for like this Goldilocks opportunity that the vendor is willing to be patient, sell at a price that's not unreasonable, and that you could financially make the project work.
Yeah.
So we say no to like out of 1,000, 990.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And you guys have always stuck to the island of Montreal. Or have you done projects elsewhere?
No, we know the political system here in terms of like how to get permits. So, and development is so niche. If you go to Boston, it's like completely different. Yeah. You go to Toronto, completely different. So we know how the city of Montreal works. And that being said, every borough is actually different. So you go to the Sud-Ouest, it's different. You go to Ville-Marie, you go to Rosemont. So we're very happy staying with development in Montreal. We are working towards a project after we finish our pipeline of expanding outside of Montreal and in particular the US.
Okay.
We could talk about that after as well if you want, but that's a longer term vision of what we see growth after our development pipeline is kind of tapped out.
So now you're looking at several markets in the US, possibly acquire land and develop?
Yeah, so not exactly for today because we still have, let's say, 3,000 units in our pipeline that we have to build. So we're still very focused on getting our stuff done.
Yeah.
However, that being said, we have developed, my brother and I, this platform where we're using fundamental analysis to analyze cities using census data, using real estate data, using population data. So what city is the best investment dollar for dollar? Where are cap rates, which is your return when you buy a building, the highest, where it should be lower? Where can you invest and potentially get some market tailwinds? Because right now we're seeing a lot of market headwinds.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find opportunities. How do we strategically locate ourselves to find a tailwind?
Have you identified any of those markets in the province of Quebec?
No, this effort was really focused on the US.
Okay.
We wanted to diversify out of Montreal, out of Quebec. That like we would be interested in the rest of Canada, but we wanted to really, because we have basically 100% of our stuff in Montreal.
Yeah.
And
within a 30-kilometer radius.
Yeah, the GMA.
Yeah. Huh, interesting. And you wouldn't consider smaller markets like Quebec City, Sherbrooke?
Not for development.
Even Gatineau. I mean, Gatineau's gone through a huge boom and now it's kind of, that bubble is kind of popping. Interesting. And even other places in Ontario?
Not for development.
No. Not
for development. We're really happy with our efforts here in Montreal. If we do development in another city, it's going to be boots on the ground. You have to really learn the market. So we're willing to take a back seat and invest outside. That's less, strategically difficult in terms of like all these hurdles. And we could kind of analyze it from an office rather than physically locate ourselves there. But for development, we're, have a niche in Montreal and stay here.
Yeah. And stay in that niche and go a mile deep.
Exactly.
3 years ago, when you had been on the podcast, you had developed an algorithm called Square Feet for the pricing of condos, taking a certain set of variables. And with the now, changes and evolutions that we've seen in the last 2 years, with artificial intelligence and everything that came with it, automation and so on, as you were just talking about, the analysis for some of the markets. To what degree have you guys, because you're part of the young generation, okay? Like you actually, I know you love this stuff. It's not just fluff, like, oh, I have to take this technology. Like you see the impact and the benefits of it. To what degree have you guys started to incorporate artificial intelligence in some of the underwriting, site assessments for your future projects?
For underwriting and site assessment, less so.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of prospecting,
Mm-hmm.
very heavily invested in that. My brother Mark
Mm-hmm.
is very passionate about computers and programming, and he actually was one of the main guys who built Square Feet.
Yeah.
I was just
You guys together.
Yeah. And since then, like we've been working on Square Feet for 10 years, for example, and then we kind of just launched it when we met. And now he continued, and we built another platform where we're prospecting now. So it's a custom platform where he scrapes all kinds of data.
Mm-hmm.
He collects all the owner information, all the numbers, and now we have teams of people calling, and it's basically, he built like a CRM. So is it AI? AI is just artificial intelligence, meaning that there's an artificial way of helping you.
Yeah.
So yes, it is artificial.
It's really automation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he has automated
Mm-hmm.
a massive component of prospecting. And now we just have a team of people hitting the phones.
Yeah.
Me included.
Mm-hmm. Call. Well, you call the top 20, I hope. You don't call everything.
No. And I also support the team that calls and meet with the vendors.
Yeah.
And but yeah, we are heavily, like, it's the way to automate and systematize your work. And without it, it's hard to, it's hard to work through the chaos if you're not systematically organized. And
and the loss of efficiency. I mean, what it took 5 years ago, now you can get it done much faster.
The way I used to do this job, and the reason why we've kind of been so heavily invested in this automation and AI is because we used to do everything manually.
Yeah.
I used to spend my weekends collecting the info low, like the lot numbers.
Yeah.
I would just manually collect it all in one day, 8 hours, a whole area.
Yeah.
The next day I would get all the owner information. Then the next, like, it would be very, very time consuming.
Super tedious.
And then I would cold call them, and you're already burnt by then.
Oh, yeah.
So like he's automated 95% of the work.
Wow.
Yeah.
More sites coming, more opportunities.
Yeah.
That's great. So when you come back in 2 years, what should I wish you now for you to achieve it?
In 2 years?
Yeah.
I would say just keep trying your best. You can't really expect outcomes in life. You just try your best. You focus on your passions. And you just push your hardest. You can't expect anything more than just the effort that you give. And the result is really just, it's irrelevant. So you just have to love to push. And I feel the privilege of being able to push. So that's more what I would say. Keep that mentality of just love the process and try your best.
Yeah. Love what you do and keep pushing it. And
and no matter what, like whether it's work, whether it's hobbies, just keep trying your best.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that matters.
Beautiful. I like that.
Yep.
And for all those who are listening, I know that every time you're going to drive by or walk around at BERRI UQAM, you're now going to look at it differently.
There you go.
Because of this very conversation.
Yeah.
And I tend to be the guy where then I pass the place with my kids, or when we go to a Bibliothèque Nationale, I'm like, 2 years from now here, there's going to be a beautiful building, and there's going to be thousands of people who are going to live here, and they're going to get to study. They're going to they're going to make life memories. They're going to contribute to the city. And that's a dent that a couple of guys had a vision. They made it happen. And for that, it's, I lift my hat because you guys are at a whole different level. Jordan, thank you very much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Having me.
Really, it means a lot. And for all those who are listening, as usual, keep researching your market, check the zonage, and make some offers. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.